Welcome back. So it's part two, and we're still talking about Kalief Browder, and the article is Before the Law. It was published in the New Yorker magazine in 2014, and the author is Jennifer Gonnerman, and she was a Pulitzer Prize finalist for it. And Before the Law is meaningful, like the title, being equal before the law, that everyone should be treated fairly before the law with no regard to race or poverty and other social circumstances. I'll read on. On the morning of July 28, 2010, Browder was awakened at around 4:30. He was handcuffed to another inmate and herded on a bus with a group of other prisoners. At the Bronx County Hall of Justice, they spent the day in the basement holding pen, each waiting for his chance to see a judge. When Browder's turn came, an officer led him into a courtroom and he caught a glimpse of his mother in the spectator area. 74 days had passed since his arrest. Already he had missed his 17th birthday, the end of his sophomore year, and half the summer. So I'm pointing out the things that he's losing, right? The writer is pointing that out, giving the information, and I'm pointing you to it. A grand jury had voted to indict Browder. The criminal complaint alleged that he and his friend had robbed a Mexican immigrant named Roberto Batista, pursuing him, pushing him against a fence, and taking his backpack. Batista told the police that his backpack contained a credit card, a debit card, a digital camera, an iPod Touch, and $700. Browder was also accused of punching Batista in the face. A clerk read out the charges: robbery in the second degree and other crimes, and asked Browder, "How do you plead, sir? Guilty or not guilty?" Browder was just 17 years old, right? Still a child. "Not guilty," Browder said. An officer escorted him out of the courtroom and back downstairs to return to Rikers. It no longer mattered whether his mother could find the money to bail him out. The Department of Probation had filed a quote violation of probation end quote against him. Standard procedure when someone on probation is indicted on a new violent felony, and the judge had remanded him without bail. Browder repeatedly told O'Mara, his court-appointed lawyer, that he would never plead guilty and that he wanted to go to trial. O'Mara assumed that his courtroom defense would be, "Listen, they got the wrong kid." After all, the accusation had been made a week or two after the alleged robbery, and the victim had later changed his mind about when it occurred. The original police report said on or about May 2nd, but Batista later told a detective that it happened on May 8th. With each day spent in jail, Browder imagined that he was getting closer to trial. Many states have so-called speedy trial laws, which require trials to start within a certain time frame. New York State's version is slightly different, and it is known as the ready rule. The rule stipulates that all felony cases except homicides must be ready for trial within 6 months of arraignment, or else the charges can be dismissed. In practice, however, this time limit is subject to technicalities. The clock stops for many reasons. For example, when defense attorneys submit motions before trial, so that the amount of time that is officially held to have elapsed can be wildly different from the amount of time that really has. In 2011, 74% of the felony cases in the Bronx were older than 6 months. The thing is, when the case is being delayed, if you're outside, it's one thing. If you're inside, you're suffering and you have not been found guilty of anything. In order for a trial to start, both defense attorney and the prosecutor have to declare that they're ready. The court clerk then searches for a trial judge who's free and transfers the case, and the jury selection can begin. Not long after Browder was indicted, an assistant district attorney sent the court a notice of readiness, but they were not ready. June 23rd, 2011, people not ready, request a week. August 24th, 2011, people not ready, request a day. November 4th, 2011, people not ready, prosecutor on trial, request 2 weeks. December 2nd, 2011, prosecutor on trial, request January 3rd. New York City pays lawyers like O'Mara known locally as 18B attorneys, $75 an hour for a felony case, $60 for misdemeanor. O'Meara handles all types of cases, from misdemeanors to homicides. When I met him earlier this year, he was eating a hamburger and drinking coffee at a diner in Brooklyn after an appearance at a courthouse there. He was about to take the subway back to the Bronx, and his briefcase was bulging with papers. He told me that Browder, compared with some of his other clients, was quiet, respectful. He wasn't rude. He also noted that as the months passed, his client looked tougher and bigger. I wonder why stuck in prison would do that to you, right? For a defendant who is in jail, the more a case drags on, the greater the pressure to give up and plead guilty. By early 2012, prosecutors had offered Browder a deal, 3.5 years in prison in exchange for a guilty plea. He refused. I want to go to trial, he told O'Meara, even though that he knew that if he lost, he could get up to 15 years in state prison. Stories circulate on Rikers Island about inmates who plead guilty to crimes they didn't commit just to put an end to their ordeal. But Browder was determined to get his day in court. He had no idea how rare trials are. In 2011, in the Bronx, only 165 felony cases went to trial. In 3,991 cases, the defendant pleaded guilty. So when people tell you they're there in prison and they're not guilty, you see the corrupt system that is unfolding, right? Not long after arriving on Rikers, Browder made his first trip to solitary confinement. It lasted about 2 weeks. He recalls, and followed a scuffle with another inmate. Quote, "He was throwing shoes at people. I told him to stop," Browder said. "I actually took his sneaker and I threw it, and he got mad. He swung on me and we started fighting." Browder was placed in shackles and transferred by bus to the Central Punitive Segregation Unit, which everyone on Rikers calls the Bing. Housed in one of the island's newer jails, the Bing has 400 cells, each about 12 feet by 7. For Browder, this was the first of several trips to the Bing. As soon as he discovered a prisoner there doesn't leave his cell except to go to the rec, the shower, the visit room, the medical clinic, or court, whenever he does leave, he's handcuffed and strip searched. To pass the time, Browder read magazines, XL, Sports Illustrated, Hip Hop Weekly, and street novels handed on by other inmates. One was Sister Soldier's Midnight. He'd always preferred video games, but he told me, "I feel like I broke myself into books through street novels." He moved on to more demanding reading and said that his favorite book was Craig Hunger's House of Bush, House of Sod. Summer's the worst time of year to be stuck in the Bing. Since the cells lack air conditioning, in the hope of feeling a breeze, Browder would sleep with the window open, only to be awakened at 5 a.m. when the cell filled with the roar of planes taking off from LaGuardia, one of whose runways is less than 300 feet from Rikers. He would spend all day smelling his own sweat and counting the hours until the next shower. He thought about the places he would have been visiting if he were not spending the summer in jail. Mapes Pool, Coney Island, Six Flags. One day when he called home to talk to his mother, he was allowed 1 6-minute call a day. While in solitary, he could make out the familiar jingle of an ice cream truck in the background. His teen life slipping away right in front of his eyes, things he could be doing, but there he is stuck in jail. There hadn't been much to do at the RNDC, but at least there were school classrooms where the inmates were to be taken every day to study for GED or a high school diploma. The Bing had only self-study. A correction officer slid worksheets under the door in the morning, collected them a few days later, and eventually returned them with a teacher's marks. Some inmates never bothered to fill in the worksheets, but Browder told himself, quote, "I'm already in jail, I might as well keep trying to do something." There were times, however, when nobody came by to collect the worksheets on the day he'd been told they were due. If Browder saw a captain walk by through the small window in his door, he would shout, "Where's the school correction officer to pick up the work?" Deprived of an education, still trying to get one. Who's suffering here, right? Near the end of 2010, Browder returned to the bank. He was there for about 10 months through the summer of 2011. He recalls that he got sent there initially after another fight. One an inmate is Once an inmate is in solitary, further minor infractions can extend his stay. When Browder first went to Rikers, his brother had advised him to get himself sent to solitary whenever he felt at risk from another inmate. I told him, when you get into a house and you don't feel safe, do whatever you have to do to get out, the brother said. It's better than coming home with a slice on your face. Even in solitary, however, violence was a threat. Verbal spats with officers could escalate. At one point, Browder said, "I had words with a correction officer and he told me he wanted to fight." That was his way of handling it. Can you believe it? You're an adult, this is a child, you're a professional, and you want to fight them. He had already seen the officers challenge other inmates to fights in the shower where there are no surveillance cameras, so I agreed to it. I said, "I'll fight you." The next day, the officer came to escort him to the shower, but before they even got there, he said the officer knocked him down. He put his forearm on his face, and my face was on the floor, and he just started punching me in the leg. Browder isn't the first inmate to make such an allegation. The U.S. Attorney's report described similar incidences. So prison is not only affecting the inmates, it's affecting the keepers, the correction officers, because they are becoming dysregulated. Browder's brother, or they came dysregulated. Browder's brother reconsidered his advice when he saw him in the bank visiting area. For one thing, he says Browder was losing weight. Several times when I visited him, he said, "They're not feeding me." The brother told me he definitely looked really skinny in solitary. Food arrived through a slot in the cell door 3 times a day. For a growing teenager, the portions were never big enough, and in solitary, Browder couldn't supplement the rations with snacks bought at the commissary. He took to begging the officers for leftovers. "Can I get that bread?" Sometimes they would slip him an extra slice or two. Often they refused. Browder's brother also noticed a growing tendency towards despair. When Browder talked about his case, he was very strong, adamant. "No, they can't do this to me." But when the conversation turned to life in jail, it's a total different personality, which is depressed. He's like, "I don't know how long I can take this." The following night in his solitary cell on Rikers, Browder shattered his plastic bucket by stomping on it, then picked up a piece, sharpened it, and began sawing his wrist. He was stopped after an officer saw him through the cell window and intervened. Browder was still on Rikers Island in June of 2012 when his high school classmates collected their diplomas, and in September when some of them enrolled in college. In the fall, prosecutors offered him a new deal. If he pleaded guilty, he'd get 2.5 years in prison, which meant that with time served, he could go home soon. 99 out of 100 would take the offer that gets you out of jail. O'Meara told me. He just said, "Nah, I'm not taking it." He didn't flinch, never talked about it. He was not taking a plea. So you see all the things Browder missing. His diploma, college. By the end of 2012, Browder had been in jail for 961 days and had stood before 8 different judges. He always maintained his composure, never berating his attorney or yelling protests in the court. O'Meara was impressed by his control. I can't imagine most people sitting in there for 3 years and not becoming very upset with their attorney, he says. He just never complained to me privately, though. Browder was angry about the prosecutors. He would tell himself, "These guys are just playing with my case," and they were, right? March 13, 2013, Browder appeared before a new judge, Patricia M. DeMango, who had been transferred from Brooklyn as part of a larger effort to tackle the Bronx's backlog. She was known for her no-nonsense style when dealing with defendants. At the Brooklyn courthouse, she was referred to as Judge Judy. As it happens, this year she became a judge on the Hot Bench, a new courtroom TV show created by Judge Judy. That's way back in 2014. In the Bronx, the Mango's job was to review cases and clear them by getting weak cases dismissed, extracting guilty pleas from the defendants, or referring cases to trial in another courtroom. At the start of 2013, there were 952 felon cases in the Bronx, including Browder's, that were more than 2 years old. In the next 12 months, the Mango disposed of 1,000 cases, some as old as 5 years. Judge DeMango explained to Browder, if you go to trial and you lose, you could get up to 15 years, that is. Then she offered him an even more tempting deal. Plead guilty to 2 misdemeanors, the equivalent of 16 months in jail, and go home now on the time already served. If you want that, I will do that today, DeMango said. I could sentence you today, it's up to you. So here you see them just playing with him, like it doesn't matter if you're guilty or not, they're just trying to clean up their case load. I'm all right, Browder said. I did not do it. I am all right. You're all right, DeMango said. Knowing, right? She knows that you can't be all right and right, because why are you trying to get somebody to plead to something that he's saying he didn't do? Yes, he said, I want to go to trial. Back at Rikers, other prisoners were stunned. You're bugging, they told him. You're stupid. If that was me, I would have said I did it and went home. Browder knew that it was a gamble. Even though he was innocent, he could lose at trial. I used to go to my cell and lie down and think, like, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm going too far, he recalled. But I just did what I thought was right. On May 29th, the 31st court date on Browder's case, there was another development. DeMango peered down from the bench. Quote, the district attorney is really in a position right now where they cannot proceed, she said. It is their intention to dismiss the case. She explained that this could not officially happen until the next court date, which ended up being a week later. I'll release you today, but you have to come back here on time without any new cases, she said. Do you think you can do that, Mr. Browder? Yes, he said. Browder could not believe what had happened. His battle to prove his innocence had ended. No trial, no jury, no verdict. An assistant district attorney filed a memo with the court explaining that Batista, the man who had accused Browder, had gone back to Mexico. The district attorney's office had reached his brother in the Bronx and tried to arrange for him to return and testify, but then the office lost contact with the brother too. Without the complainant, we are unable to meet our burden of proof at trial, the prosecutor wrote. Browder had not spent one more night on Rikers. Browder had to spend one more night on Rikers. By now, he had missed his junior year of high school, his senior year, graduation, the prom. He was no longer a teenager. 4 days earlier, he had turned 20. They took this child's life from him. He didn't know what time he would be released, so he told his mother not to bother picking him up. The next afternoon, he walked out of jail, a single thought in his mind, I'm going home. He took the bus to Queens Plaza, then 2 subways to the Bronx, and his euphoria began to dissipate. Being around so many people felt strange, except for a few weeks he had been in solitary confinement the previous 17 months. After leaving Rikers, Browder moved back home where his mother and 2 of his brothers were living. Everybody could see that he had changed. Most of his clothes in his bedroom no longer fit. He had grown an inch or 2 while he was away and had become brawnier. Many of his former pastimes, playing video games, watching movies, shooting hoops in the park, no longer engaged him. He preferred to spend time by himself, alone in his bedroom, with the door closed. Sometimes he found himself pacing as he had done in solitary. When he saw old friends, he was reminded of their accomplishments and what he had not achieved: no high school diploma, no job, no money, no apartment of his own. Before he went to jail, he used to like sitting on his front steps with his friends, and when a group of attractive girls walked by, he'd call out, "Hi, what are you doing? Where's the party at? Can I go with you?" Now, if he managed to get a girl's number, the first real conversation would always go the same way. She would ask him if he was in school or working, and he would feel his anxiety rise. Once he revealed that he was living at home without a job or a diploma, they looked at me like I ain't worth nothing, like I ain't shit. It hurts to have people look at you like that. He could explain that he had been wrongfully arrested, but the truth felt too complicated, too raw and personal. "If I tell them the story, then I gotta hear 100 questions," he said. "It gets emotional for me, and those emotions I don't feel comfortable with." Not long after Browder returned home, one of his relatives called an attorney named Paul V. Prestia and told him that Browder had spent 3 years on Rikers only to have his case dismissed. "Send him down," Prestia said, a former prosecutor in Brooklyn. Prestia now has his own firm. On his office wall hangs 2011 Post story about a Haitian chef from the Bronx who was mistakenly arrested for rape and spent 8 days on Rikers. Prestia got the case dismissed. Prestia has represented many clients who were wrongfully arrested, but Browder's story troubles him most deeply. Quote, "Kalief was deprived of his right to a fair and speedy trial, his education, and I would even argue his entire adolescence," he says. "If you took a 16-year-old kid and locked him in a room for 23 hours, your son or daughter, you'd be arrested for endangering the welfare of a child." Brother doesn't know exactly how many days he was in solitary, and Rikers officials, citing pending litigation, won't divulge any details about his day, but he remembers that it was about 700 or 800 days. Jesus. One day last November, 6 months after his release, Browder retreated to his bedroom with a steak knife, intending to slit his wrists. A friend happened to stop by, saw the knife, and grabbed it. When he left the house to find Browder's mother, Browder tried to hang himself from a banister. An ambulance rushed him to St. Barnabas Hospital, where he was admitted to the psychiatric ward. In his medical record, a social worker describes the suicide attempt as serious. One afternoon this past spring, I sat with Browder in a quiet restaurant in Lower Manhattan. He is 5'7" with high forehead, tired eyes, and a few wisps of hair above his upper lip. "Being home is way better than being in jail," he told me. "But in my mind right now, I feel like I'm still in jail because I'm still feeling the side effects from what happened in there." When I first asked if I could interview him, he was reluctant, but eventually he agreed, and we met many times. We always met in downtown Manhattan near Prestia's office. He didn't want to meet in the Bronx and seemed to feel more comfortable speaking where nobody knew him. He almost always wore the same uniform, a hoodie with the hood pulled down, a pair of earbuds, one stuck in the air, the other swinging free, a rosary beads dangling from his neck, not because he's Catholic. His family are Jehovah's Witnesses, but for fashion, he said. When I asked him about Rikers, he surprised me with his willingness to speak. At times he seemed almost unable to stop, as if he had long been craving the chance to tell somebody about what he endured. Other times, though, the act of remembering seemed almost physically painful. He would fall silent, drop his gaze, and shake his head. Ever since Browder left Rikers, he has tried to stay busy. He sat through GED prep classes, signed up for a computer course, searched for a job, and attended weekly counseling sessions. This past March, he learned that he passed the GED on the first try. "I gained some of my pride back," he told me. He landed a job as a security guard, and not his dream job, but it could serve him while he looked for something better. By coincidence, one of the places he was sent was St. Barnabas. On his second day there, he overheard some employees talking about him. Somebody seemed to have figured out that he had been in the psychiatric ward. Soon afterward, with a vague explanation, he was fired. Prestia helped him find a part-time job working for a friend who runs a jewelry business in the same building as Prestia's office near Wall Street on May 29, 4 days after his 21st birthday and a year to the day after DeManga told him that he would be set free. Browder stood on a sidewalk in front of a Chase Bank handing out flyers advertising the jewelry business. He told me that he liked Wall Street, being surrounded by people with briefcases and suits, everyone walking with a sense of purpose. When I see professional people, I see myself, he said. I say I want to be like them. Exactly how he would manage this, he was not sure. Most days the progress he had made since coming home did not feel like progress to him. It's been a year now, and I got a part-time job and I got my GED, he said, but when you think about it, that's nothing. People tell me because I have this case against the city, I'm all right, but I'm not all right. I'm messed up. I know that I might see some money from this case, but that's not going to help me mentally. I'm mentally scarred right now. That's how I feel, because there are certain things that changed about me, and they might not go back. This month, Browder started classes at Bronx Community College, but even now he thinks about Rikers every day. He says that his flashbacks to that time are becoming more frequent. Almost anything can trigger them. It might be the sight of a police cruiser or something more innocuous. When his mother cooks rice and chili, he says he can't help remembering the rice and chili he was fed on Rikers, and suddenly, in his mind, he's back in Bing, recalling how hungry he was all the time, especially at night, when he'd have to wait 12 hours for his next meal. PTSD. Even with his friends, things aren't the same. I am trying to break out of my shell, but I guess there's no shell. I guess this is just how I am. I'm just quiet and distant, he said. I don't like being this way, but it's just natural to me now. Every night before he goes to sleep, he checks every window in the house is locked. When he rides the subway, he often feels terrified. I might be attacked, I might be robbed, he says, because believe me, Jill, you know there's all types of criminal stuff that goes on. No matter how hard he tries, he cannot forget what he saw. Inmates stealing from each other, officers attacking teens, blood on the day room floor. Before I went to jail, I didn't know about a lot of stuff, and now that I'm aware, I'm paranoid, he said. I feel like I was robbed of my happiness. On June 6, 2015, at the age of 22, Browder lost his life to suicide. I don't have words. You see how the system hurts people. You see who it hurts. Thank you so much for listening.